Welcome to 'Cause We're Nerds, the podcast that covers trends and new releases in comics, movies, video games, board games, and much more. I'm your host, Zach, and with me is my co-host and cousin, Caleb.
Hey everyone!
Thanks for joining us as we dive into the MCU this week. Has Avengers Infinity War broken any records, and what new revelations have come out about this movie? What is our definitive list of MCU movies? And finally, why is Marvel so successful? Find out the answers to these questions and much more on this week's episode of 'Cause We're Nerds. Before we begin the episode, a fair warning to all of you out there. This episode will contain massive spoilers for Avengers Infinity War. So if you would like to stay completely spoiler-free for that movie, do not listen to this podcast before. You have been warned. So Caleb, we have obviously been busy after the week of Infinity War, and I would say most notably has been your victory in Marvel trivia. So congratulations. Good job, good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tell me and some of the audience a little bit about that.
So, as I've said before, I live in the metro Atlanta area, and there's a really awesome, video game bar called Battle and Brew here that most of the nerdy folks know down here. And every Wednesday they have trivia, and then the first week of the month they have theme trivia.
So Caleb usually loses. He usually is really bad at it.
Well,
but this Wednesday, different story.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, it's just usually really, really hard. And I wasn't even planning on going. They moved a couple years ago when I haven't really gone as much. But Chris from the CNC Power Hour texted me. He was like, hey, they're doing MCU trivia. Do you want to come? And so I went, and we have never won. I've been many times, and it's just so hard. There's so many people there. And this time there were 40-something teams, so at least 80 people, but way more than that because most teams have 3 or 4 people.
So you pulled out a victory. What did you receive as your winning prize?
So this week, they gave me a $30 gift card back to their place so I can go back and not have to pay so much. The trivia's free, but, food and drinks and stuff while you're there. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, number one. In fact, it's kind of funny. It came down to a tiebreaker for first and second and another tiebreaker for third and fourth.
Okay, so do you remember any of the questions you were asked?
Basically, it's done in rounds. So there's 3 questions per round, and there's 6 rounds. One question for each round was from the TV shows, which was kind of hard because I haven't really been keeping up. So like the one for Jessica Jones. Spoilers for all Marvel TV right now. The one for Jessica Jones is, what is the name of the person that Kilgrave used to spy on Jessica?
Luke Cage?
No, it's her neighbor dude, the guy that's strung out on drugs.
Oh, yeah.
We put Curtis. That's wrong. I think
you tried.
I think it's Malcolm is what his name is. So that one was pretty hard. They had another really hard one from the Defenders, which was, what's the guy's name at the very beginning of the show that they kill that is Stick's protege? Never
watched it.
Oh, well. It's Shaft, but I don't think they ever say in the show. He said no one got that.
The guy's name, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so some hard TV questions. Any movie questions? I'm sure you would have rocked those.
Oh, yeah. I got most of the movie ones. Let me see. Let me think here. One of the ones that you will probably know, Zach, is what is the language used in Black Panther?
Kosa.
That's right. I knew that one, mostly because of you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Did anybody else get that one?
There were a couple. Not very many, I don't think.
They Googled it. 100%. You're the only one that actually knew it without Googling it.
No, I don't think so. There's a woman up there when she was turning in her question, yelling at the guy saying, those are my people. So I think she knew.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but there were some others. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. Some of them are pretty hard, but the most difficult by far were the TV ones.
Sure, that would make sense. And Caleb, I'm glad you talked about the TV because I think it's a nice segue into our Infinity War update. Now, obviously, we're going to cover domestic and foreign box office and what records that Infinity War has broken. But I would like to bring up something we didn't cover in our last week's podcast. That is when the ship with Ma and was it Obsidian that came to New York?
Yes, Call Obsidian.
Yeah, Call Obsidian. When that ship landed in New York, there was Spider-Man, there was Iron Man, there were some wizards. Where the heck were the Defenders? They were supposed to be defending New York.
You know, I heard that question earlier this week. We don't actually know when the Defenders takes place. It could be before this.
That's true, but you think one of those heroes would jump out of the woodwork and maybe assist. I mean, that would have been really cool. Obviously, they couldn't really do that because it's just so separate, and I don't think they will ever have any type of interaction from, the movies to the TV shows.
Yeah, as we've talked about before, the schedules just don't really work out for that, so I'm not surprised they didn't show up. And look, there was enough characters in the film. I wasn't looking for more.
So Infinity War, what box office records has it broken, Caleb? Why don't you give us the rundown?
All right, so, funny enough, in the trivia night, the tiebreaker question was how much money had it made the day before, which at that point was $808 million. It currently, I saw an article today saying it had broken $850 million just since last Thursday, which is crazy. I think it's probably going to break $1 billion by this weekend. We're recording this the following Thursday from when Infinity War came out. So I think it's going to take it a week to hit $1 billion.
So Avengers broke a ton of records. I mean, in 1 week it made that, right? Because right now, we're recording on a Thursday, and it came out at this time last week. So in 1 week, well, actually in about 3 days, it surpassed Justice League's box office total.
Yeah, not only that, but it did finally cross both the Star Wars films to have the biggest opening weekend ever.
Yeah, there was an image released with Rey having a lightsaber and passing it to Iron Man, and I think it was signed by Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, and that was a really cool image.
And Mark Hamill even tweeted something out basically saying, like, congratulations, Avengers. Don't throw Rey's lightsaber when you get it. I've tried that before. Wait until she leaves. So, of course, Mark Hamill being funny on that, too. But, yeah, just outstanding so far.
Yeah, and, not only did it break records, but the Russo brothers made a surprise appearance at a high school and answered a bunch of questions that we had last week.
That's right. Well, close. It was a university, actually. It was Iowa City University, which Joe Russo graduated from.
So he showed up, and one of the things he answered was the half Asgardians, whether that was, half from the original Asgard, if it was half on the ship. It was half on the ship. He said some people got in escape pods and escaped, and he confirmed that Korg and Valkyrie and Meek are all still alive.
Close. So you're completely right on all of that, except when it comes to Korg, he didn't... Stop moving your eyebrows, Caleb. That's so weird. Caleb is moving his eyebrows up and down. Like
I'm going all Grandmaster on you.
Oh, no. No, so Joe Russo confirmed that Valkyrie is still alive, but was pretty hit or miss on Korg. I don't think he was pressed on it, but he never stated definitively, yes, Korg and Meek are still alive. Now, I'm assuming that's just the case because they don't know if Watiti's on board again, so you can't really say Korg's, because if he doesn't come on board, they don't have a voice actor for Korg, so he could be an easy death for them. I mean, it wouldn't really matter. But Valkyrie for sure is 100% alive with that escape group.
Yeah, I actually remember that being the case now, but I think that the reason they were saying that is because he's going to play into the next Avengers, I think. I think he's going to be a player that comes back, and they don't want to reveal exactly what he's up to yet.
Caleb, talking about the next Avengers, what do you think it could be named? Kevin Feige recently came out and basically just disowned the theory that's being passed around that says Avengers 4 is going to be called Infinity Gauntlet. He came out and was like, guys, this is hilarious, and this is not the case. This is the most bogus guess ever. So we know for sure, 100%, it's not going to be called Infinity Gauntlet. But if you had to guess at this moment, what would you call Avengers 4? Since we're not going to know the name of it for about, 3-4 more months?
I have no idea. And Kevin Feige said that he feels it's been blown out of proportion at this point. That is probably not going to be as big a deal as everyone's making it, which makes me think it's probably an original title that's not linked to the comics. Or maybe it's something that is linked but isn't as big a deal.
It sounds like it might be original. One of my favorite theories I saw out there was if it was called Avengers End Game, based off of what Doctor Strange said.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite as well. I know that another one that's rumored is, I think, The End, which is a storyline with Thanos. I think it's an alternate universe storyline, but Endgame sounds way better.
Oh, for sure. Now, Caleb, as we're talking about the news when it comes with Infinity War, I don't know if you saw this article, but recently Tom Holland came, you know how he was almost spoiling this movie for a bunch of people?
Yeah.
Well, he actually spoiled it for an entire audience. So there was an audience, I believe it was in England, but I'm not exactly sure. And some of the cast came out, like sometimes the cast does in theaters, and people were clapping. And then Tom Holland came out and he mistook that this audience had already seen the movie. And so he came out and he's like, guys, I'm still alive.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, so while Tom Holland just spoiled Infinity War for a theater, I've seen some articles showing where we had Mark Ruffalo, who spoiled the entire movie like a year ago when he was like, guys, everybody dies. And I can't remember who was in the interview with him, but they're like, dude.
It was Don Cheadle.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, they were like so mad at him.
Yeah, I remember when that happened and everybody was like, oh, he's just joking. I didn't think he was joking. I thought it was real. I'd kind of forgotten about it, but it totally was real.
Yeah, I do remember it as well. I thought people were joking, but no, he actually spoiled the movie. Wow. And while we're still on Tom Holland, one last thing is that his death scene, since I've already mentioned it, apparently was all improvised by him. So in the script, it just stated that he was like going to die. And so he decided to bring some more weight to that, and give that very emotional, I don't feel well, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. So, I mean, props to Tom for doing that.
Yeah, it would not have had the same impact without that ending and that death to it. So I am really impressed with him, and good job, guys. Good job. So some other things that came out this week is apparently the Hulk was going to be in this movie more. Did you see this, Zach?
I did not. Tell me more, though.
So there have been some promo art pieces released on some products and things, and even a pop that's released of the Hulk breaking out of the Hulkbuster armor.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. But what happened?
Sometime at the end of the movie, I'm guessing, probably when the Outriders kind of jump on him and are taking him over, he would have transformed and busted out of the Hulkbuster, which still would not have really been the Hulkbuster in the armor like you thought, but a lot closer.
That's right, but I guess they decided to scrap that to continue that storyline of Bruce not needing the Hulk, possibly?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't really know why. Maybe it just wasn't fitting with the tone of what they were doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway, so that's pretty cool. The other thing that we kind of overlooked last week was that Infinity War fixed the Spider-Man Homecoming timeline issue.
Yes, I saw some of that, but why don't you go ahead and explain how it fixed the issue?
So we talked about in our Spider-Man Homecoming episode that it says, 8 years later?
It's 8 years later, yeah.
Yeah, 8 years after the attack on New York that happened in Avengers, which would put it in 2020, but that doesn't make sense because it's also set like 3 or 4 months after Civil War, which is definitively in 2016. So there was all this confusion about where is it actually and what's going on. In Infinity War, they actually specifically say that it's been X amount of time since Civil War and some other events. So it tells us for sure that that title card in Spider-Man was a mistake. And in fact, the Russo brothers said the same thing in an interview.
Now we're just waiting for them to correct the mistake that we found on Black Panther.
Yeah, well, I think it's a little wishful thinking.
Very true. Well, with us caught up to Infinity War, we now have to look forward at other MCU movies that are coming next. And pretty quickly, we are on the heels of Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is coming this July.
Now, Zach, I don't know about you, but I feel they missed a major opportunity here. They dropped this, I think, the day before their 10th anniversary.
Are you talking about the new trailer?
Yes, the new trailer. They should have waited a day and dropped it on the 10th anniversary.
That's very true. And I'm assuming, though, you have seen the new trailer. I thought it was a really good trailer. I liked the soundtrack to it as well. I can't recall what it is off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, isn't that song in a Deadpool trailer, though?
I don't think so, but it's a pretty old song.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back and check this, though, because both times I've seen it, I'm like, I feel like this was in a Deadpool. Maybe it wasn't a trailer. Maybe it was a promo video. Something I felt like it was used in Deadpool, but...
It's that song. It's the, it makes two to think anything go right.
Yeah, I like this trailer. I liked it a lot more than the first one. The first one felt way too over generic to me, really. This new one looks like it has a lot of style, looks like it has a lot of wit. That was kind of missing from the first one. I mean, we had elements of that, but as we've talked about, because Edgar Wright left that one, I think it was missing a lot of those directorial things that people bring to it. And I feel like Peyton Reed, as evidenced by this trailer, has really brought his style to it.
Yeah, that's very true. For me, this trailer basically said, are you tired of feeling sad after Infinity War and feeling downcast? Well, this is a movie that's just going to be lighthearted and fun and funny. So prepare yourself for that and don't come in too seriously, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I think maybe Infinity War changed my outlook on that too. I think maybe before I was like, another really, happy-go-lucky Marvel film. I wish I had a different style. But after Infinity War and how dour it is, I could use the uplifting nature of that.
And so I think that's really smart marketing-wise, and I am looking forward to this movie. It will be fantastic.
And for those of you wondering, I think it's been confirmed now that this movie takes place before Infinity War, which would make sense. I mean, I don't know how you would place this between Infinity War and the next one. It would be really strange given the events that happened in that movie. So I'm glad that supposedly it's before.
Yes. Well, Ant-Man and the Wasp will make the 20th movie in the MCU, which is pretty astonishing. And throughout our road to Infinity War, Caleb, you and I both listed our comprehensive lists of MCU movies. Now, over the previous week, Caleb, you put those lists together to make a full definitive list, which takes your average for each movie, my average for each movie, combines them and puts them in one major list. And there weren't too many conflicts that happened when you did that, correct?
Yeah, I think there were about 4. So basically, I took your ranking for the movie and my ranking for the movie, added them together, divided by 2 to get an average number, and that's where those landed. And then for those 4 movies, we pretty much talked about which ones we felt should be put above the others. Obviously, we didn't agree on all those, as our lists say, but we worked it out. And so this is, Cause We're Nerds, definitive list of MCU movies. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
All right, at number 1, as we mentioned last week, is Avengers Infinity War.
That's right. I told somebody this week that it was my number 1. They were astonished, but like we said, it lives up to the hype. It is excellent.
Number 2 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Also excellent. This could have also been number 1. They're both very close.
I agree. Number 3 is the next Captain America movie, Civil War.
And Caleb, I think this is pretty evident in our lists. These are just top 3 movies. I could go back and watch these 3 movies again and again.
And what's interesting is these 3 movies were all directed by the same 2 people.
The Russo brothers are just geniuses.
Number 4, Black Panther.
Now, this was a little more interesting. I put this a little lower. You put it a little higher. I've been regretting how low I've put Black Panther, so I actually like where this sits currently in our definitive list.
Oh, interesting. Do you feel that it's gotten better with time or just more thinking about it?
I think more thinking about it. I just liked how fresh it was, and I talked about it in Infinity War that I wish I would have seen more Black Panther in Wakanda, and so after seeing Infinity War, I'm like, wow, because I'm wishing that, it's because of how much I liked the Black Panther movie.
Well, I'm glad to see that you've come around.
That's right. It's changed.
Number 5, the original Avengers.
And this is just so iconic. Should it be number 5? Maybe not. But I think you have to understand that this was such an iconic movie, and that helps it get the number 5th spot.
True. And, beyond that, it's still enjoyable.
It really is. It brings all the heroes together. It has so many memorable moments.
Number 6, Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 1.
They're funny, they're quippy, it brings a cast of heroes together we've never seen before. What's not to love?
Number 7, Thor Ragnarok.
Also funny, also quippy. If this was my list, Thor Ragnarok would be much, much, much higher. Unfortunately, it only ends up in number 7th because of Caleb's unfortunate and ill-informed placement on his list.
It's not that low on my list. It's number 10. You had it at number 4.
True. It's really hard when you have so many good movies.
Yeah, I think, as we've said before, that's really the issue with ranking these. Number 8, Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, that pretty much says it all.
Oh, no. All right, well, I'll say a few words about this one then. This movie is really great about reintroducing a character that audiences are familiar with in a fresh and new way while also sticking really close to the comics. Kudos to everyone for being able to do that and for making it entertaining.
Agreed.
Number 9, Iron Man.
What I love about Iron Man is that this right now is basically sitting perfectly at right in the middle of the pack. And I think that's where it should be. It kicked off the whole MCU, right? Has a lot of highs, but it also has some unfortunate lows. For me, it's just a middle of the road. This kind of splits what movies I will for sure be watching again and again, and what movies I will only revisit when there's an iconic Avengers 4 or Avengers 5 that I need to go back and watch all the MCU movies over again.
Yeah, I noticed when I did this list that it was sitting in the middle, and even looking at our list, you had it at number 9, and I had it at number 9 as well, so it didn't move at all, so, we both think of it the same way, and I think you're exactly right. Great movie, but middle of the road only because Marvel has gotten better.
Exactly.
Number 10, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
Yeah, this one was fun. It brought back the characters that we loved, and, I had some issues about it not being, I guess, quite as clean, kind of vulgar in a different way. The humor wasn't in the first one, but still very funny and entertaining.
And Caleb, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to somebody at work the other day, and they watched Infinity War and loved the movie, but they were very confused because they had not seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Doctor Strange, or Thor Ragnarok. So they were very, very confused.
Yeah, I think that there's a few movies you definitely need to see before Infinity War, and some of those are on that list.
Agreed.
Number 11, Doctor Strange.
I'm surprised this one didn't make it higher on our lists. I just think there's so many good movies, and while this was a really good movie, it just doesn't necessarily stand out compared to Black Panther or Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, it had some really great visuals, but ultimately, it's just kind of average. I don't know what it is about it, but I think a sequel, if we get one, which I think we probably will eventually, will fix some of those issues. Number 12, Captain America, The First Avenger.
Fantastic movie. I mean, I love it. What's not to love?
Number 13, Ant-Man.
I'm surprised this is so low. I know that mine was a little higher, but again, I see it on par with Captain America, the First Avenger, and Doctor Strange.
Yeah, with me, the weird thing with my rankings is they're not what I would have thought I would rank them before we started this podcast. My rankings would have been a little bit different just going by memory, and even now, going by memory, I still feel that a little bit, so it's kind of a struggle for me to combine what I've ranked with how I felt at that moment and how I feel now. And I still stand by my rankings. But I think rewatching some of these films, you feel very different about it than what you remember you feel. Number 14, Thor.
Yep.
A solid entry.
Solid entry, but not worthy of a higher place, I would say.
Well, it might not be an amazing movie, but it was the first to bring magic into the universe, and it did it very, very well, even though it was more of a techno-magic, so I think it gets props for that alone.
Oh, I agree.
Number 15, Avengers Age of Ultron.
All right, so I hear that name, and I know we are starting to really reach down to the bottom of the barrel here.
Oh.
I'm like you said, Caleb, my memory says that Age of Ultron should be a lot higher, but then when I actually think about the movie, I'm like, well, there's a reason it's not that high.
And my reaction is actually opposite. I remember thinking it should be lower, and then bringing it higher to the top after I watched it. Number 16, Thor: The Dark World.
Other than the fact that this ties in an Infinity Stone, you don't really need to see it.
No, you don't need to see it, but if you go back to that episode and listen to it, we were both more impressed with it than we were the first time we saw it. It's a film that I think you kind of have to manage your expectations for. I think a lot of people were expecting more, and they were just disappointed because it wasn't.
And then there's Darcy in there too, so you know.
Number 17, The Incredible Hulk.
What's interesting is that even though the other two movies below this fit into the MCU better than The Incredible Hulk still beats the other two out. This has a lot of issues, but if you just want to see a giant Hulk beating up another giant Hulk, then watch this movie.
Number 18, Iron Man 2.
It introduces Black Widow. There's some good stuff in here, but there's a lot of bad stuff in here.
Yeah, people always think that this movie is all set up. As we discussed in that episode, it's really not. No. It's only maybe 10 to 20 minutes of setup that does really slow the movie down, and that's why everybody remembers it. But overall, it's a pretty cohesive film that I think gets a worse rep than it deserves.
Somewhat cohesive. Remember we talked about there's a lot of issues in that timeline compared to Stark's dad and War Machine and a bunch of other stuff as well. But it's decent.
And last on our list, number 19, Iron Man 3.
I know we got some flack for putting this both fairly low on our lists, especially since it actually did really well at the box office. But I just didn't like it.
Well, box office isn't everything. Transformers makes lots of money, and I wouldn't call most of those movies very good.
I wouldn't really call them even movies. Just Michael Bay in his basement being like, what's next?
Yeah, and this is one of those movies that if I was just going off memory, this would be higher. But watching everything in order again, it just kind of falls to the bottom.
Yeah, so that's a really good list. That's, I think, a very well thought out definitive list. By two smart and highly intelligent people, if I could say that.
That's right. We know what we're doing. We're not making this up as we go.
But we are.
All right, well, with that list, finished off, I thought, this would be a really awesome time to think about why the MCU is so successful. Infinity War has done very, very well. Marvel over the past 10 years has done very well for itself. Sometimes it has more issues than others. But with so many other studios and even the comics not doing well, Zach, why do you think that the MCU in particular is so successful?
That's a great question. Think about any other franchise and nobody has been able to keep up with them at all. So if you think about other franchises that are out there, you have to think, okay, there's the Dark Universe that completely failed, basically. There's the DC Universe that is failing. They're trying to reboot that in a very weird direction. The only thing I can think of that could possibly match this on a movie level, so not TV shows, but just movies, would be something akin to possibly Harry Potter, since that had 8 movies, and now they're having more movies come out. But still, it's not the same, right? Because it was based off the books, it's not original content, and second, it's different. It's all the same characters. They're not bringing in a bunch of new characters with separate movies. So I think Marvel, in part, is so successful because it was one of the first ones to blaze this trail, and they took some risks, but so far, the risks have paid off.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that Harry Potter is based on something else, because these movies are based on something else as well. But I think one of the key differences is these movies adapt ideas from decades of comics and kind of distill it into its own new story, whereas Harry Potter, you're right, is pretty much just cutting away the fat from the books and making a few changes here and there, but it's really just adapting those, and it is just one series. Sitting down thinking about this, I think really one of the big reasons, probably the biggest reason, is Kevin Feige himself.
And I would agree, Caleb. Talking about adapting different source material, there are hundreds of movies out there. Some that come to mind are Aragon, Ender's Game, all those video game movies we keep getting that are terrible, that have such rich history that they could adapt on, and they don't. And it falls flat, and Marvel somehow was able to capitalize on all that rich history. And like you said, Caleb, it's because of Kevin Feige.
Now, I think there's a couple reasons that it comes down to him. Probably the biggest is that these movies are not directed by a board of directors like the DC movies are. These movies are directed, not literally, but like the path that they take, by one person, Kevin Feige. He has a central vision, a master plan for the universe. Now, he doesn't section himself off from everybody else. That would probably create a terrible movie, but he knows where he wants to go, and that's where things go. And when you have a board of people, I work in a place that has boards of people, and it just slows everything down. They end up making terrible decisions because they can't agree on anything. And I feel like, especially for DC, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's leadership 101, right? Kevin Feige can think big picture, where he wants to take the universe. And I believe I even read an interview not too long ago where he was saying he just came out of a meeting where they were talking about Avengers in 2024, 25 and what that's going to be like, right? So he knows the big picture. He knows where he wants to take it, and he moves the entire franchise in that direction.
Yeah, it's always helpful when you have one person that you can come to ask yes or no, or what should I do? And he's that guy. Even though he does pull in advice from other people, which is a strength, he's able to decide, no, that doesn't make sense. Yes, that does make sense, and I'm sure he's made mistakes himself. He is not a perfect man. Nobody is perfect. But based on the track record of movies we've gotten, he seems to be very adept to what he does.
And he knows hairstyles.
Well, actually, that leads into my next point about this, Zach, is he knows the characters. And it's not just him either. The people that he brings in to make these movies, whether they know it before they come in or after they come in and before they make the movie, they know these characters backwards and forwards. And it's really helpful when you're developing scripts and things to come to Kevin Feige and say, hey, is this work? This is the direction we want to go. He can say, oh, no, that's not going to work. That's not that character. And he's really smart about being able to figure out which characters you can change a little bit, like Iron Man in the original and the Guardians in both of their movies, or characters that need to stay more so the same, like Black Panther or like a Spider-Man or something.
I mean, that's true. Again, when you have somebody that is steering the boat, to have knowledge of that boat is just incredible.
And when he does that, he also places his trust in his directors. We've talked about how Marvel kind of didn't do this a lot up front. They had a bunch of success with Phase 1. Phase 2 came around and they had some pitfalls, right? They were trying to do different things. They hired Shane Black for Iron Man 3. They hired Alan Taylor for Thor 2. They thought that these were good directions, but when you watch those movies, there's clearly a problem. Maybe it's not that they don't trust their directors, but based on what some of them have said, I feel like that's the problem. I mean, Mickey Rourke has said that he did not have a good experience working with Marvel because they cut out everything he wanted to do, and he's not the only one that said that.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when you look at Disney as a company, they not only own Marvel, but they also own Lucasfilms, right?
Right.
And so if you look at that kind of side, Kathleen Kennedy over there in Star Wars, they run a very tight ship. Everything has to go over that channel, right? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff we could get into that we might have to get into. We probably will when Solo comes out. But I think that's kind of hurt that franchise versus when you pop over here where Kevin Feige has been able to help coach his directors, but he doesn't restrain and restrict the material they put out.
And I think that's a really interesting parallel you bring between Star Wars, especially because they're both owned by Disney. I feel like at this point, Star Wars is not a movie franchise, right? It's evolved beyond that. It's a multimedia franchise. So when they're making these decisions, it's not movie first. It's how can we sell toys? How can we use this to sell toys? What video games can we make around this? What books can we make around this? How many characters can we introduce to bring these other stories around in the future and make more money? But for Marvel, the movies are it. Everything feeds out of the movies, so it allows them that freedom to do creative things, to take chances like the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, whether you like it or not. That was a big risk, that was a big departure from the comics, and if that were in the Star Wars universe, I don't think that would have happened.
So hats off to Kevin Feige himself.
Zach, I don't want to rag on DC, but we have to talk about it here because they're the other big comic company that's trying to make movies. One thing that I feel they have done poorly is trying to jump in and do massive stories and big ideas without building up to them first. And not only build up to them, but without getting to know the characters. For example, Batman v Superman. That movie was not, I don't think, originally planned to be the sequel to Man of Steel. Given it was early on in that process that they did decide to go that direction, but I think when Man of Steel was originally being written and scripted, that was not the plan. I think the plan was originally to have a Man of Steel 2, maybe some other movies to launch the universe. But because Man of Steel was successful, they immediately grabbed onto it and jumped into a massive story that's told in Batman v Superman. And, spoilers for this movie if you haven't seen it yet, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. Superman dies in it. The death of Superman is in his second movie. And as a lot of people that I've listened to have said, we don't really care about Superman.
No, I mean, there's a lot in that movie. You're right. That happens. There's the death of Superman, the introduction of Doomsday, the introduction of Lex Luthor, who has not been in, that franchise yet. Superman dies in his second appearance. We have an introduction, of Batman, an introduction of Wonder Woman. They stuffed a ton of stuff in a sequel to Superman, all trying to catch up to what Marvel had done.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of studios that have done this. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man 2 made the same mistake. It stuffed too much in an effort to jump forward to where Marvel is, and that is not a way to make a movie. That's not a way to make a universe either. The goal should be movies first, story first, characters first. If it makes sense for these other things to happen, do it.
Sure.
Like Civil War did for Marvel, right?
But they had been building up to that at that point, right? And so instead of just jumping in, what I'm getting what you're saying and what I agree with it is that you have to build up to it. You can't just jump in. You need to have some base and to build on that structure.
Right. And I'm not even saying build up with that in mind either, because I think that also creates problems when you end up with movies that are basically ads for the next movie.
Iron Man 2. Just kidding. That's not. I mean, and if you look at the DC universe, those movies I wouldn't say are terrible. I know they get a bad rep. I think we just went over our definitive list of MCU movies. Some of those DC movies would definitely be over those MCU movies we went over. However, if you would just look at the lists in general, I would say that the DC movies just simply don't compare to the ones that are out there from Marvel.
Yeah, and they've had the same issues that Star Wars has had about hiring people with a vision and then getting scared and recutting it before it comes out.
Instead, just like Marvel, they should really just hire the Vision. Got him.
I feel that if you're going to make a movie, hire a director and follow through with that vision, and don't rush things, guys. I mean, Wonder Woman is a perfect example. They did not make that movie to advertise a sequel. They weren't trying to build up to anything in that movie, and it was very well received.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
And so, there's probably other reasons that Marvel's successful. I mean, an interesting topic really is why they're successful when the comics are failing, which is a whole nother discussion, which probably brings into, people aren't reading as much these days, at least not books. They're reading more online, and movies are smaller little nuggets that you can watch. But I think that when you're trying to copy Marvel, like so many studios have now, you can't just copy their success. You can't copy the movies. You have to copy their entire strategy if that's what you're going to do. And that includes this behind-the-scenes planning and all the buildup that you have to do to get that payoff.
And what's interesting is while, yes, Marvel has been killing it when we're specifically talking about the MCU, Caleb, you just mentioned it, their comics are decreasing, right? The number of people who are reading and buying their comics. Their TV shows are doing okay, but not fabulous. Their animated shows are basically non-existent. If you look at other franchises, some are doing a lot better. Look at DC. Their comics are actually, I believe they're also going down a little bit, but not at the rate that Marvel is. DC is doing a lot better in sales of comics. Their animated TV shows are doing a lot better than Marvel's non-existent. So DC is doing some things right. We're just specifically talking about the cinematic universe.
And Marvel, you say non-existent animated series. They actually have several. There's a new Spider-Man one that actually just came out that I haven't seen yet. We just don't really know about them because they're marketed more towards kids these days. DC does a lot of direct-to-video films that are more adult-oriented, which I would love to see Marvel do again. They used to do that. The MCU specifically is, I think, I don't want to put it on a pedestal because it's just a movie company. It's almost like that light post out in the distance, right? You're at sea. That's what you want to get to. And some of these other companies are driving straight ahead, not looking at the water, and they run into the rocks and they sink. But Marvel ships take their time. They look where the rocks are and they navigate their way through them.
Using superheroes. So the MCU and Marvel just in general has done amazing. Now they not have only been doing amazing, but looking forward to the future, it looks like they are projecting that they themselves will continue to do amazing because they have a ton of movies that are up to date. So Caleb, I thought we could quickly go over these, maybe make a few predictions and see if we get any of these right. So far in 2018 and 2019, they have slotted 3 movies, but there is kind of a 4th that I'll mention in there. So the first that we talked about is Ant-Man and the Wasp in July 2018. That means that in 2018 they will have released 3 movies: Black Panther, Infinity War, and this will be the 3rd. Now this year there's another movie. It's not put out by Marvel, but it's in association with Marvel.
Yes, that's Venom coming out from Sony Studios. There's a lot of confusion about where this fits in the MCU, if it's connected or if it isn't. I don't really know the answer to that.
We have heard rumors that Tom Holland could possibly make an appearance in this movie. We won't really know until we see it. My assumption is that he might make an appearance. This won't really detail how it fits in the MCU, but it won't really matter that much. And so that means for 2019, we do already have 2 movies slotted. We have Captain Marvel, March 2019, and then we have Avengers 4 in May of 2019. And Caleb, these dates are just assumptions.
Are they assumptions? Because I thought these were pretty much set in stone.
I haven't seen anything set in stone to these dates. I thought it was just generic around those times.
Okay, I guess we need to look it up for sure, but I am like 99% sure that these are exact dates and that they're the only ones that have been set beyond Infinity War and Ant-Man and the Wasp.
That could possibly be true. I mean, we know for sure that those are the movies coming out. Now, we do have a whole list of other movies I will throw out a minor spoiler alert, but the movies that will be coming out, so Spider-Man 2 has been confirmed, for sure. They are making a Homecoming 2 or Spider-Man 2 or whatever, right? My assumption is that's coming out in 2019, so that we're going to start going into 3 movies each year, right? Because then that would mean Captain Marvel, Avengers, and Spider-Man 2 could come out possibly in June, or they could push it to November, December. They have also pretty much confirmed, I mean, these ones aren't confirmed, but as we've talked about, they're going to happen, would be Black Panther 2, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Well, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has been just as confirmed as Spider-Man 2. I don't think there's been official press releases, but they're both happening.
Now, what that leaves us with is that Marvel has set dates in the future. They have set 3 movies in 2020, 3 movies in 2021, 3 movies in 2022, and I just talked about how Kevin Feige was just in a meeting where they talked about Avengers in 24 and 25. So if we assume that Spider-Man 2 is in that 2019 slot, then the next year is 2020. Let's assume Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Black Panther 2 make an appearance in that 2020 spot. What else would you think might make an appearance in 2020, as well as the 6 unlisted movies in 21 and 22?
So I think one of these is definitely going to be a Doctor Strange sequel. I don't know where exactly it's going to land, just because, I mean, it's up in the air about how much time they're spending between installments. I think definitely Captain Marvel is going to be one of these.
Captain Marvel, a sequel, number 2?
Yeah, sequel, sorry.
You know, I agree with you there. I could also see them, if they are going in the direction of like outer space, doing a Nova movie. We have talked about that.
And Kevin Feige actually recently talked about wanting to do that movie.
Well, there you go. It's pretty much confirmed. Marvel has also talked about doing an Eternals movie.
Yes, I did see that. That's probably going to be one of these films. And I also think some of these films are going to be new characters, right? I mean, Marvel introduced all their new characters in Phase 1. Phase 2 was all the same except for Guardians. It kind of felt like they waited until Phase 3 to start introducing more new characters. And I feel like that's going to start shifting, where they're going to try to introduce at least 1 or 2 new characters each phase, so that we don't get this massive exodus at one time.
And what I could see happening too, Caleb, is Avengers 4 is going to kind of finalize that story arc with Thanos, right? So they're going to have to do something else, because they can't just bring in another bad guy, because that would be the exact same thing. So my assumption is they are going to go possibly to a Secret Invasion storyline, or somewhere along the lines of King the Conqueror. In the comics, if you're not familiar with either, Secret Invasion is where this alien race called the Skrulls can shapeshift, and they shapeshift into different superheroes, pretending to be them, and then try to take over Earth. So I definitely could see that happening in, 2022, somewhere along the lines of Avengers Secret Invasion. The other storyline I could see happening is King, which is all about time travel.
Yeah, and Kevin Feige said that they're not going to have a big bad in the universe going forward. I kind of don't believe that. I feel like the way Marvel has built themselves, you have to have something. Maybe it's not Thanos or a villain like that, but you do have to have like a Secret Invasion or some big event that I feel you're building towards. I also think we might see more of an emphasis on team-up movies, and I'm assuming what is going to be Phase 4. Following the ones that we've talked about, especially Ragnarok, that seems to work really, really well. I would like to see more films like that. That way, they can keep these characters in films and keep them relevant without oversaturating the market. I mean, 3 movies is a lot for 1 year. This year, we got 3 of them in 7 months, less than 7 months. It'll be like 6 months, 5 to 6 months that 3 Marvel movies will come out. In fact, Black Panther is still in theaters. I think this is the first time we've had 2 MCU movies in the theaters at the same time. So that's not something they want to keep up, I don't think.
I mean, it could possibly get to the point where we do have 3 movies in the theaters at the same time. Who knows? Maybe there's a theater still playing Black Panther. It's highly unlikely since it's coming out digital this week. But I could, see some of those cheap $1, $2 theaters playing all 3 movies at the same exact time. But you're right, Caleb. Marvel fatigue could really hurt this franchise if they're not careful.
And you know what? I just realized Iron Man was probably out when The Incredible Hulk came out because they came out so close together. But anyway, yeah, they're very careful about that. And so I don't think they're going to make that mistake. Some of these other movies, I'm not quite sure. One of them will be an Avengers movie.
So what would be your prediction? Let's say 2022 is probably an Avengers movie, and I would assume then that 2024, 2025 is another Avengers movie. What's your prediction then on the next story arc going into Avengers 5, 6, 7, etc.?
Well, I actually disagree that we're going to have one back-to-back again. I don't think they're going to do that again until maybe like a sixth movie. Like maybe it's every 3 they do a back-to-back one. I think you almost have to go smaller. I mean, I know it's an Avengers movie, but you almost have to go more personal. I think a Secret Invasion storyline would work wonderfully with that aspect because it is a big story, but your friends are being replaced by aliens. And when you find out that's a deeply personal experience, especially with the Skrulls being introduced in Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I think that's highly likely that will be the new storyline they head into.
But at the same time, they know we know that. So, and another thing we haven't even talked about is the Fox-Disney merger. That is supposed to be finalized by this time next year. And I know Kevin Feige has said that they're not really thinking about those movies and those properties right now. But assuming that happens, I am sure one of those characters will pop up in Phase 4.
Oh, for sure. So assuming that happens, okay, we have the Fantastic Four, we have the X-Men. I mean, this is a whole nother discussion for a whole nother podcast, but they could potentially, we're looking at 2025, I would probably say 2030, see like an X-Men versus Avengers. I think Marvel and Kevin Feige wouldn't just make that happen right away. They wouldn't just thrust all these heroes into the universe, but they would build up to it. But I could completely see that being a huge possibility.
Right, and you mentioned Fantastic Four. From what I've read, actually, they won't get Fantastic Four because while Fox has produced those movies, they don't actually own the rights. It's another company that owns the rights that had a deal with Fox. So that's a little bit of a gray area about if they're going to land back at Marvel. But I could see them doing like 1 or 2 X-Men characters, introducing them to the universe, kind of the same way they did with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, maybe in someone else's movie, not really explain what they are and then talk about it later. But whatever they do, they're going to do it in a smart way. I wouldn't expect them just to flood the market with like a whole another franchise of X-Men. They're smarter than that.
It goes back to what we talked about with Kevin Feige. We trust him. He's at the helm. Go Marvel.
All right, so aside from Avengers 4 next year, of the movies that are coming out and ones that we think are coming out, Zach, which one are you most excited for?
I'd probably say Black Panther 2, if not Captain Marvel.
Okay, yeah, so I am more on the cosmic side. If they're going to do a Nova movie, I would love to see that. I do love the Guardians movies, but I want more of a serious cosmic movie, kind of like Infinity War. And I think that Captain Marvel is probably going to give that to us in a certain extent, and any others that they can do in that vein would be really cool.
Agreed. Well, to wrap us up, Caleb, I thought we could just briefly mention the direction, the path of our podcast. So our podcast has mainly been focusing on covering the events of Infinity War, and obviously that has just taken place. So where are we going after this? Well, all you really have to do is look at our intro where we say that we're a podcast that covers trends and new releases and comics, movies, video games, board games, and much more.
That's right. We have a list of things that we would like to cover, including those things as well as anime and board games and all other kinds of pop culture things. We'll talk about things as they come out, like we're going to talk about Han Solo clearly when it comes out, Ant-Man and the Wasp. We're still going to cover those things. But I think the format's going to be a little bit more talkative, a little bit more casual, like this episode was. If you guys like that, let us know. We really, really want to hear from you. You know, we want to hear your feedback, and you can do that. But we're really, really excited. And there's some things that I think we're going to get into. And you know what? We might even have some guests on the show to get some other opinions.
That's right. Well, we're going to be changing our music, have some guests, changing what we talk about. It is going to be fairly exciting. But we do need 2 things from you, and that is 2 questions we have for you. The first is there anything in video games, movies, board games, anime, and much more that you would like us to talk about? The second important thing is when it comes to the Marvel movies, would you rather have us just talk it out like we were talking it out here, or would you have us do a completely kind of same podcast that we have been doing called The Road After Infinity War? where we break down those movies in the same intense detail that we have been breaking down the movies so far. We would like to leave that up to you, so just let us know what you would like us to do and kind of what your opinion would be on that.
And do keep in mind as well that even if we go that route, it's going to be more like Infinity War, just because we'll be doing those the week following when they come out. And so there's not as much distance for us between it. There might not be as many Easter eggs that have been discovered and things like that. And, we're only human. We can't sit there and dissect every second of every frame in the theater. So just keep that in mind.
But we are excited about the new direction our podcast is taking, and we would love it if you would join us. Well, we would love to give a shout out to Taylor Poole. He will be producing some awesome new music for our podcast coming up. So go ahead and visit him over at taylorpoole music.com.
And while you're waiting on our next episode, as always, please check out CNC Power Hour. I hung out with Chris and Andy from that at the trivia show just a couple days ago. They're really awesome people. They stream Magic the Gathering and video games throughout the week on Twitch.
And finally, we just dropped our Infinity War podcast. So we'd love it if you would send your friends, your family members, your Iron Man suit over to our website. You can find that at cuzwerenerds.com. Thanks for listening to Cuz We're Nerds. We would love to hear your comments or feedback at cuzwerenerds@gmail.com. That's cuzwerenerds@gmail.com. You can also leave us a review or message on iTunes or Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or any other major social networking or podcasting sites. Join us next week as we cover the relaunch of the Avengers comic book and how it possibly retcons the entire mutant universe. Changes to Fortnite with the release of Season 4, and the direction of Battle Royale modes in video games and the impact it has on streaming services. Find out these questions and much more on Cuz We're Nerds. Stay nerdy. My phone went off. I don't know if you heard that. My phone. Sorry. Let me put this on silence. My mom texting me, "Mom, I'm recording. Your son's doing big things."